All right. So you sent over this whole stack of research on refactoring,
Yeah.
and I thought I kind of had a decent grasp on it, like cleaning up your code, making it
Right.
more readable, all
Mhm.
that jazz. But going through all this stuff,
Yeah.
I'm realizing it's like way more strategic than I thought. It's
Mhm.
it's almost like a secret weapon
Yeah.
for better design
Yeah.
and maybe even landing,
Right. Yeah.
those top tech jobs.
It's true. Refactoring is definitely about way more than just tidying up. It's really like a very deliberate process of improving the structure and the design
Okay.
of existing code without changing
Interesting.
its external behavior.
So it's not about adding new features or anything. It's about improving
It's not about adding new features.
what's already there.
Yeah. It's like a
It's almost like a behind the scenes upgrade.
precisely. Think about it like you're renovating a house, right? You're not changing like the overall layout of the house.
Right.
Right.
But you're modernizing the plumbing, you're
Right.
rewiring the electrics, maybe even knocking down a wall or two
Okay.
to create a more open, more efficient space.
Okay. That makes sense.
Right.
But why go through all that trouble? What's the real payoff?
Well, for starters, refactoring makes your code easier to understand.
Oh, yeah,
It means
that's right.
right. Because just imagine trying to troubleshoot a problem in a messy, disorganized
All right.
code base.
Yeah.
It would be a nightmare.
Oh, I can definitely see how that would just like suck up all your time.
Exactly. And refactoring helps you avoid that by making the code more uh, readable and logical,
Right.
right? And this not only makes debugging easier, but it also makes it simpler for others or even, your future self
Right.
to understand and work with the code.
Right. So it's not just about making things pretty, it's about making them
Yeah, it's done.
functional and efficient and
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that efficiency translates into several benefits.
Yeah. Right. From, faster development times to reduced costs in the long run.
Okay.
And you touched upon a really interesting point earlier
Yeah.
about landing those top tech jobs.
Yeah. The Algo Academy blog post
Yeah.
mentioned
those though.
how refactoring skills were like highly sought after by companies
Hmm.
like Google and Facebook. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't they want someone who could like pump out new features
Yeah, yeah.
super fast?
Speed is definitely important, but so is sustainability.
Right.
Right. These companies have massive code bases that are constantly evolving. So they need developers who can not only write new code, but also
Yeah.
improve and maintain existing code.
Right.
And refactoring is just a critical skill for ensuring that their systems remain stable, scalable, and adaptable.
So if you can show
No.
solid refactoring skills,
Yes.
like you're not just some code monkey, you're like a strategic thinker. Who cares about the long term
So long-term health. Yeah.
health of the project?
That's a highly valuable asset in any tech company,
Yeah.
especially the giants, like FAing. In fact, a lot of these companies specifically test for refactoring skills
Right.
during their interview process.
So they actually give you like a messy chunk of code
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
and say refactor this.
It's not uncommon at all. And they want to see how you approach the problem,
Wow.
what techniques you use,
Okay.
and how you ensure that the changes don't introduce new bugs.
That's intense.
Right.
That really just shows how important these skills are in the real world.
It really does. And it's not just about landing a job, right? It's about becoming a better developer overall.
Right.
Refactoring forces you to think critically about code design, right? To understand these underlying principles
Yeah.
that make code clean, efficient, maintainable.
So it's like a mental workout for your coding skills.
You could say that. And the more you practice refactoring, the better you become at recognizing patterns,
Right.
identifying potential problems,
Yeah.
and applying the right solutions.
Okay.
So it's a continuous learning process.
Okay. I'm convinced. Refactoring is definitely more than just spring cleaning for your code.
Yeah.
It's a strategic approach
Mhm.
to improving quality, boosting your career prospects, maybe even just sharpening your problem-solving skills.
Absolutely.
But how do you actually do it?
Yeah.
The Algo Academy blog post mentioned a bunch of specific techniques.
Right.
Some sounded pretty straightforward, like extract method. I made a great analogy to recipes.
Yes. Extract method is a great place to start.
Yes.
It's all about breaking down these long, complex methods into smaller, more manageable
Right.
chunks.
Okay.
So think about it like taking, a complicated recipe, right, and separating it into distinct steps. Instead of having this one giant paragraph of instructions, you have clearly labeled sections for prepping ingredients,
Right.
cooking, assembling,
Yeah.
and so on.
So you're not changing the overall dish.
You're not
You're
changing
just making the recipe easier to...
easier to follow and understand.
Exactly.
Right?
And in code, this makes your methods more readable, reusable, and easier to test.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about rename method? That one sounded pretty self-explanatory. Like,
Yeah.
just give your methods
Yeah.
better names.
More than just better. They need to be descriptive, right?
Right.
Think of it like labeling the containers in your pantry.
Right, yeah.
Instead of having, a bunch of generic jars labeled stuff, you have clear labels that tell you exactly what's inside. Flour, sugar, spices.
So it's about clarity
Right.
and organization.
Okay.
Makes sense. But then there was replace conditional with polymorphism.
Oh, yeah.
That one sounded a bit more...
Intimidating.
It is a bit more advanced,
Okay.
but it's incredibly powerful.
Okay.
And it's a favorite for those FA-ing interviewers.
Really?
Instead of relying on these long chains of if-else statements
Right.
to handle different scenarios, polymorphism lets you define different types
Okay.
that each handle their own logic.
Okay. I think I'm going to need a real world example for this one. It's a little abstract.
Sure. Imagine you're building an app
Yeah.
that calculates shipping costs.
Okay.
And you might have different shipping methods like ground, air, and overnight.
Right.
Each with their own pricing structure.
Right.
So instead of having this massive if-else block
Yeah.
to determine the cost based on the chosen method,
Mm-hmm.
you could define separate shipping method types, each with its own cost calculation logic.
So instead of one big messy conditional statement,
Yeah.
you have smaller, more focused pieces of code.
Exactly. And this makes your code much more adaptable. Oh, okay. Because if you need to add a new shipping method, you just create a new type instead of modifying that giant if-else block.
That's pretty slick. I can see how that would be like a game changer for these, large complex systems.
Right.
But are there any downsides to refactoring? It sounds
Yeah.
like it takes time and effort, which are often in short supply, especially when you've got deadlines.
You bring up a very valid concern.
Yeah.
Time constraints and the fear of introducing bugs are often cited as, reasons to avoid refactoring.
Right.
But remember, it's not an all or nothing proposition.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to refactor your entire code base overnight.
So it's more about incorporating it into your regular workflow.
Precisely. Think of it like regular cleaning and maintenance, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't wait until your entire house is disaster before tidying up.
Right.
You do a little bit here and there to prevent things from getting out of hand.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Small, consistent efforts are key. But what about the risk of introducing bugs? It feels kind of risky
Yeah, of course.
to mess with code that's already working.
Right. It's understandable to
Yeah.
feel that way. But here's the thing. Refactoring is about making small, controlled changes.
Okay.
And testing is absolutely crucial
Oh, right.
throughout the process.
Got it.
Each small change you make should be tested thoroughly to ensure that you haven't broken anything.
So it's like a delicate surgery. You're making these precise incisions and carefully testing
Yeah.
everything along the way to make sure the patient, or in this case, the code.
Perfect analogy.
Perfect
It's
analogy.
analogy. And just like a skilled surgeon
Yeah.
uses the right tools, right?
Right.
A skilled developer uses the right refactoring techniques and tools.
Okay.
And speaking of tools, this is where modern IDEs and specialized software can really...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One of the sources mentioned that a lot of IDEs have built-in
Yeah.
refactoring features.
Mhm.
That sounds like a huge time saver.
Yeah, it can be. Many IDEs can handle common tasks like, renaming variables, extracting methods, moving code around.
Right.
They can even perform checks to ensure that the refactoring doesn't break your code, which is a huge relief.
That's awesome. So you're not doing everything manually, which definitely makes it seem a lot less
Right.
daunting.
Mhm.
But Besides IDEs, are there any other tools that can help with this?
Absolutely. There are several platforms and extensions specifically designed to support refactoring. For example, SonarQuad and ReSharper
Okay.
can analyze your code
Yeah.
and suggest areas for improvement,
Mm.
while things like CheckStyle and ESLint can help
Yeah.
you enforce coding standards and best practices.
Wow. So there's a whole ecosystem of tools
Yeah.
out there to help us do this effectively.
Yeah. And remember, you don't have to jump into the deep end all at once. Right.
Right. Start by experimenting with small refactorings
Okay.
in your own projects. Familiarize yourself with the tools
Yeah.
and gradually incorporate it into your workflow.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how much of a difference it can make.
Great advice. Small steps, big impact.
So-
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about how this fits into the bigger picture of
Yeah.
software development.
That's a great segue into our next discussion point. Agile development,
Okay.
right? One of the core principles of Agile is continuous improvement.
Right.
And refactoring plays a key role in that process.
Yeah.
It's not just about, delivering new features quickly. It's also about ensuring that the code base remains
Right.
healthy and adaptable over time.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's delve into that
Yeah.
connection in more detail.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's do it. So we've talked about how refactoring it's more than just making your code look pretty. It's about like improving the structure and the readability and, maintainability and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But how does this fit into
Mm-hmm.
like the fast-paced world of Agile development,
Yeah.
where it seems like, getting those new features out quickly
Right.
is often like the priority.
That's a great question. Agile isn't just about speed, right? It's about sustainable development. So imagine you're building a house brick by brick,
Okay.
right? If you just keep adding bricks without paying attention to the foundation or
Right.
the overall structure, eventually that house is going to become unstable
Yeah.
and prone to collapse.
Okay, so the code is like the foundation of the house.
Yes.
And if it's not well structured,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter how many fancy features you add on top, the whole thing could.
Yeah,
So-
precisely. Refactoring is that essential maintenance that keeps the foundation strong.
Got it.
It ensures that the code base remains flexible and adaptable.
Right.
So you can keep adding those new features
Yeah.
without compromising the integrity of the entire system.
So it's like you're constantly like reinforcing
Yeah.
the foundation as you build, which
Mm.
lets you build like higher and more complex structures
Yes.
without fear of it all
That's a great
falling apart.
way to put it. And that's where the beauty of Agile comes in.
Okay.
Instead of, trying to refactor everything at once,
Right.
which would be, overwhelming and time consuming.
Yeah.
You incorporate it into your regular sprints.
So you're essentially doing a little bit of refactoring
Yeah.
with each iteration,
Exactly.
which keeps the code base healthy
Mm-hmm.
and manageable as you go.
Exactly. It's like, tending a garden, right? You don't just plant the new seeds and then ignore them.
Right.
Right. You regularly weed, prune, and fertilize to ensure that
Okay.
the plants stay healthy and thrive.
So refactoring is like that ongoing care
Yes.
for your code base.
It is.
Okay, I'm starting to see how refactoring and agile
Mm.
really like complement each other.
Yeah, they do.
But let's get practical for a second. Let's say I'm working on a project and
Yeah.
the deadlines are tight.
Right.
How do I know when it's the right time to actually refactor?
That's a common dilemma, and there's no hard and fast rule.
Okay.
But a good rule of thumb is to, consider refactoring when you're adding a new feature
Okay.
or fixing a bug. If you find yourself, struggling to understand the existing code,
Mm-hmm.
or if you see opportunities to improve its structure, that's a sign that it might be time to refactor.
Refactoring isn't necessarily like
Right.
its own separate task.
Not a separate.
It can be integrated
It can be.
with work you're already.
Yeah, it can be integrated into the work you're already doing. Exactly.
right.
And it doesn't have to be a huge undertaking.
Right.
Even small refactorings, like, renaming a variable
Right.
to be more descriptive, or extracting a few lines of code
Yeah.
into a separate method can make a big difference in readability
Okay.
and maintainability.
So it's about being mindful
Mhm.
and taking those those opportunities
Yes.
to improve the code as you go.
Right.
But how do you balance that need to refactor with a pressure to
Yeah.
deliver the new features on time?
It's all about communication and
Okay.
collaboration when
Yeah.
you're planning your sprints.
Yeah.
It's important to factor in time
Totally.
for refactoring, talk to your team, explain the benefits,
Yep.
and make it a shared responsibility.
So it's not just a solo effort. It's more of a
It's a team.
team sport.
It is. It's a team sport, and the more your team embraces refactoring
Okay.
as part of their development process, the smoother and more efficient your workflow will become.
And hopefully that means like happier developers
Absolutely.
and a healthier code base.
Absolutely. And speaking of healthy code bases,
Yeah.
remember that technical debt we talked about
Oh yeah.
earlier?
Yeah.
Well, refactoring is one of the best ways to manage and reduce that debt.
It's like we're paying down the interest on our technical debt.
Yes.
By making these small consistent payments through refactoring.
Perfect analogy. And just like with financial debt, if you ignore technical debt, it will eventually catch up with you and can become a huge burden.
So it's better to address it early and often.
Yes.
Even if it means maybe slowing down a bit in the short term.
Precisely. Because in the long run, it will save you time. Okay.
Money and a lot of headaches.
I think I'm getting this. Refactoring is about taking a proactive approach to code quality,
Right.
integrating it into your process,
Yeah.
and viewing it as like an investment rather than a chore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, it's a skill. Like you can continuously improve.
Yeah.
The more you practice,
Right.
the better you become at identifying areas
Right.
for improvement
Okay.
and applying the right techniques.
So it's like anything else.
Yeah.
The more you do it,
It is.
the more intuitive it becomes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And there are tons of resources
Okay.
available to help you along the way. We've already mentioned the Algo Academy blog,
Right.
which offers a wealth of information on refactoring techniques.
Yeah.
But there are also, books, online courses, and communities where you can learn from other developers
Oh.
and share your experiences.
Yeah.
That's great to know. It's always reassuring to know that there's a supportive community out there for folks just, starting out on their refactoring journey.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to be a coding wizard
Right.
to refactor effectively.
Okay.
Start small, be consistent,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to experiment.
Right.
You'll be amazed at the difference it can make in your code and your career.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here from the technical details of specific refactoring techniques
Yeah.
to like the broader implications for agile development and even career growth.
Right.
But before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with? Any final pearls of wisdom about refactoring?
Yes, I would just say this. Don't be intimidated by refactoring.
Okay.
It's not some, mysterious art reserved for, coding ninjas, right? It's a practical skill that any developer can learn and master with practice. And the rewards are well worth the effort. Cleaner, more maintainable code, a more efficient workflow, and even a potential boost to your career prospects.
That's a pretty compelling argument. I think I'm ready to dive in and start applying some of this to my own projects.
Oh, good.
But before I go full refactor crazy,
Sure.
is there anything else you think I should keep in mind?
Just remember, refactoring is a journey, not a destination.
Oh.
It's about continuous improvement, constantly striving
Yeah.
to make your code the best it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace the process. Be patient with yourself. And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
That's how we learn and grow.
Right. It's not about perfection. It's
not about progress.
Exactly. And that progress can lead to some pretty amazing results.
Yeah.
For both your code and your career. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today. And I hope our listeners are feeling, as energized and inspired about refactoring as I am. But before we officially sign off, let's loop back to Algo Academy and those resources you mentioned earlier. So you mentioned Algo Academy has some pretty good resources for folks who want to,
Hmm.
get better at refactoring.
They do. They've got
Yeah.
interactive tutorials, AI-assisted learning paths, that sort of thing,
Right.
which can be super helpful,
Okay.
especially for those tricky coding interview scenarios.
Right. We talked about how those
Yeah.
FAing companies
Yeah,
love to
exactly.
see that you can
Mm.
refactor on the fly.
Right.
And it sounds like Algo Academy actually simulates
Yeah.
that kind of environment.
They kind of throw you right into the deep end.
So it's not just like learning the theory. You're actually getting that
You're getting the hands-on
experience, which is probably the best way to
Yeah, for sure.
really grasp it.
And they go beyond the basics.
Oh,
Remember replace conditional with polymorphism?
Oh yeah,
The one
that tripped me up.
yeah, that tripped you up a little bit.
Mhm.
They actually have modules that dive deep into those sorts of advanced techniques,
Okay.
helping you understand not just, how to do it,
Yeah.
but why it makes your code better.
So even if you're already like
Yeah.
familiar with some refactoring,
Yeah.
there's probably still something new you can
Oh, for sure.
pick up from Algo Academy.
Plus, they connect the dots between refactoring
Okay.
and broader software engineering principles, which is something a lot of resources kind of miss.
Right.
So you're not just memorizing these techniques, you're understanding how it all
Right.
fits into the bigger picture of, building robust
Yeah.
and maintainable software.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I went from like refactoring is cleaning up
Yeah.
to really seeing how strategic it is.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's one of those skills that can really transform
Yeah.
the way you approach coding.
So for our listener out there who maybe sent in, this stack of material because they're prepping for an interview,
Right.
or maybe just tackling a challenging project,
Yeah.
what's like the one thing they should take away?
Refactoring isn't just a nice to have.
Okay.
It's a must have
Right.
for any serious developer.
Got it.
And it's not about, achieving this mythical perfect code,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's continuous improvement. Just like any other skill, the more you practice, the sharper your instincts.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's not about being intimidated.
Yeah.
It's about getting started and just embracing that process of making your code the best it can be.
Right. And hey,
Yeah.
if it helps you land a dream job, well, that's
a nice little bonus.
that's a bonus, right?
Yeah.
It's a signal to employers
Yeah.
that you care about quality, that you care about long-term
Right.
maintainability,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're always striving to improve.
Well said. On that note, I think we've reached the end of our
Yeah.
deep dive into this fascinating world of
Yeah.
refactoring.
It has been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And to our listener, we hope this journey
Yeah.
through the source material
Mm-hmm.
has left you feeling, empowered to
Yeah.
refactor your way to cleaner,
Gosh.
more efficient.
Efficient.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Happy coding. Happy coding, everybody.